Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan and welcome to today's episode of our sports show. As you know, we've been premiering this upcoming month our upcoming feature of Global Rugby Legends. We're speaking to iconic rugby players from Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, France, England, Ireland, Wales and Scotland. I'm delighted today to be joined by our guest, a rugby legend, voted one of the all-time great rugby inside centres of the world, Tim Horan. He's won the World Cup on multiple occasions. He's won the Rugby World Cup in 1991 and he's won the Rugby World Cup in 1999 as well. He's made over 80 appearances for Australia, scoring over 140 points from 1989 to 2000, and he was voted the Rugby World Cup Player of the Year in 1999 and scored one of the fastest tries in the tournament. The Rugby World Cup in 1991 as well, he scored 4 tries. The great and one and only Timmy Horan. Timmy, first of all, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for taking the time to speak to us. And I spoke to a few people and some interesting facts came about. Some people started rugby as young as 4 in terms of Sterling Marklock. Some others, in terms of Ali Williams, started rugby as late as 17 before they touched the rugby ball. How about you, sir? When did you first started taking part in rugby?
Yeah, hi Jim. Thanks for having us on the program. And yeah, I think I started when I was about 3 years of age, but I played rugby league. So I picked up the ball and played a lot of rugby league until I was about 12 years old. And then I went to a college in Queensland, high school, you call it. And that's when I started playing rugby union because that's college played rugby. So a lot of my junior years, very junior years, I played a lot of rugby league. So there's a lot of tackling technique. There was a lot of running with the ball. And I was quite keen to stay and play rugby league, but my father said, no, you're going to this school, and the school, Downlands College, and he said, yeah, they're playing rugby, so you'll play rugby. If you want to play rugby league, you play that on the Sunday. So I was looking to play union on the Saturday and league on the Sunday, but I quite enjoyed the union game.
And Tim, growing up, were you was it just rugby? Were you much an all-rounder? Did you play other sports? Did you play football, cricket? Did you try your hand at everything, or was it very much rugby league from a get-go, from a young age?
No, from a young age, I did a lot of cricket. I really enjoyed my cricket, as a lot of people do in Australia. It's probably our national pastime, cricket, whether it's on the beach or in the backyard. And I did a lot of athletics as well, so I sort of ran a lot of sort of 400 metres in my day, but I was pleased when that finished because it was quite a grueling athletics event. But yeah, it's, cricket was great, and then different season, then of course you'd play rugby.
And Tim, in terms of starting out, were you very much academic? Could you pursue a career in other sort of areas in terms of business-wise, or was it very much, when did rugby start to take off for you, or did your parents want you to pursue another outlet aside from rugby?
Well, when I started playing rugby, and when I first started playing for Australia, I think I was just turned 19 in 1989, rugby wasn't professional, so it was amateur. So we had to get jobs. You had to work in a business, wherever that was. But you needed to find an opportunity to work and build a career in a business. So I worked for a brewery, Forex Brewery, which actually were the sponsors of the Wallabies at the time when I started playing for the Wallabies. So I had about 5 or 6 years of amateur rugby, and then the game started turning professional. I was playing it anyway. So, in those early years, you had to learn about business. And then I didn't do an undergrad. I did a postgrad MBA when I finished playing the game of rugby, when I had a bit more time.
And Tim, in terms of starting out, in terms of the Rugby World Cup and making your debut, you made your debut against New Zealand in 1989, and you've partnered it up. What was that experience for you? Was it a daunting experience for the first time taking on the Wallaby jersey in terms of a professional experience for Australia?
Yeah, I think because I was so young, I didn't really understand the aura of the All Blacks or the haka, or I'd never played for the Queensland Reds. I went straight from playing one season in club football to playing for the Wallabies, and I didn't really understand what the All Black theatre was all about. And so I think we lost that game 24 points to 12, and I was pretty happy that we got reasonably close to the All Blacks. But yeah, it wasn't that daunting because I didn't know a lot about the All Blacks. I was thrust in pretty quickly. So baptism of fire, I suppose. But enjoyed it. Had some pretty good players around me at the time, and then the next year, 1990, we were lucky enough to beat the All Blacks.
And I suppose, Tim, it was no sooner than you coming up against the All Blacks and you coming up against the great French side of Philippe Salah and testing your wit against him in terms of the centre. And that was some great French players at the time. Was that a real learning experience for you being an inside centre? I know you played some of your earlier career at fly half as well, but being thrust against some of the greats of the French teams in the late 80s as well, was that a real sort of learning birth for you?
It was a great experience to realise how much people love people like Frank Manel, Philippe Salah, Dennis Charvet, those sort of players, and we were sort of 19, 20 playing these French heroes that and thousands of people in the stadiums and outside the stadiums, and even midweek matches when we went and had our tour. And but playing those guys and great experience, but also understanding what it meant to have played, because they were towards the end of their career when I started playing them, and to understand how important their, I suppose, the way they played the game, the way they supported players after the game. We had a beer in the dressing shed, you'd swap jerseys. So I suppose all that that came with the game of rugby, it sort of epitomised those sort of players, Frank Manel, Philippe Salah and those sort of players. And then lucky enough, sort of towards the end of my career, playing with the likes of Abdel Benazi, Thomas Castagnet, those sort of players. Was great when I played for Saracens to be able to play with some French heroes.
And I suppose, Tim, moving on to the 1991 World Cup, obviously a landmark moment for World Rugby as well in terms of the Rugby World Cup. And did you went into the tournament as maybe outsides? Did you feel you went into the tournament as maybe favourites? And obviously you scored 4 tries within the tournament. Had you really embedded yourself as a regular in the Australian team heading into that tournament?
Yeah, I think we were probably second or third favourite. I think we were favourite. I think the All Blacks would have been favourites and probably England second. So, and we were happy with that. So we came into the tournament with not a lot of pressure on us, and we had a very good team. Of course, David Kempisi, Nick Farr-Jones, Michael Liner, Simon Poydon, and all these players that had been in the Wallabies for many, many years. So they had that real sort of experience and that measure. And yeah, great tournament. And it probably changed the thought process and also the people that supported rugby in Australia. There was an explosion when you get back to Australia post that Rugby World Cup in 91, where boys and girls were playing rugby. All these local rugby clubs had an explosion of junior players coming through, which was a great platform to build the game of rugby in Australia for us when we compete against Aussie rules and rugby league.
And in terms of the Rugby World Cup, in terms of what was it like? Obviously, you had never experienced something like that, but scoring a try in a Rugby World Cup, is it very much different than scoring a try in a test match or a match in terms of a Tri Nations match or a Bledsoe match? The experience of scoring in a Rugby World Cup, is it almost a different sort of an experience for a player?
Yeah, I think it is. I think when you realise how the Rugby World Cups, of course, only played every 4 years, and the supporter base from not just the Wallabies, but supporter bases from all the different teams that play, and they're all, whether they're in Dublin, whether they're in Edinburgh, whether it's in Twickenham, those matches are supported, and you look up to the stands and you see a bunch of gold scarves or gold jerseys supporting you. So yeah, it's pretty special when you score a try, but more so when you win and you know that the supporters have paid a lot of money and saved up a lot of money to travel. They're getting a great experience as well. That's what Rugby World Cups are all about.
And post the Rugby World Cup, then obviously you carried that form into 1992 and 1993, winning a Tri Nations and sort of stuff like that. But I just want to bring you on to 1994, and it was a real pivotal moment in your career. And in terms of, we all know players in rugby, the dangers associated with rugby, that one injury can obviously curtail a career, and they might. You might be no way back, but in terms of your story, it looked like God forbid, it was a happy story. But in 1994, you suffered a horrific knee injury, Tim, and for all accounts, it looked like it could be the end of the days and a long road back. Can you tell us about that day, about that sort of injury, and at that time, did you fear the worst?
Yeah, when the injury happened, was the Super Rugby final in Durban. So we were playing Natal, of course, the Sharks, and yeah, I sort of stepped to tackle a player, Henry Hannibal. I actually stepped inside me, and then my knee popped and my whole sort of femur dislocated. So I did every ligament in my knee. So you got 4 ligaments in your knee. I did all 4 of those, and my kneecap was sort of on the side of my thigh. It had dislocated, and long story short, get on the plane in full leg plaster to get back to Australia. And the orthopedic surgeon had a quick look at my knee, did an arthroscopy, and said, "Oh, Tim, I don't think you'll ever play rugby again, but let's get you back to walking without a limp." So that was a bigger cut to do that. So I didn't really care too much about rugby afterwards, but it took me probably 15 months to get back to playing rugby. And then that was, I trained myself and did physio non-stop for probably a year to get my, ligaments right to play again. And lucky enough the support around me, it all worked.
And Tim, in terms of your mental state when you suffer an injury at that time, did you go through maybe a lull mentally? Did you suffer a tiny bit maybe of depression, maybe anxiety in terms of not knowing whether you'll ever get onto rugby field, or were you happy with the thought of, right, I'll get back working? Had you good sort of family support? Were you content if your rugby career had finished with that injury?
It didn't. Yeah, I would have been content because we weren't getting paid to play. The game was still amateur, so I had a job. I could go back to my job and continue that. But I think for me, it was about just getting back to a normal life. I didn't care much about rugby. And you probably I don't think you got depressed, but you got sad because with an injury, with a major injury, sometimes it spikes and it goes really well. Other days it just plateaus for probably 2 or 3 weeks and you get no improvement. So, you mentally got to back yourself, and everyone gets injuries in the game now. And, I got back to a stage where I could walk, I could jog, and then, slowly I got back to a level to play the game. So we're pretty fortunate.
And I want to bring you on now to the 1999 World Cup, and obviously you're back now. You're back full steam, involved with Australia as such, and you went into that tournament, many eyes in terms of New Zealand went in as favourites. You probably went in pretty much like 1991, maybe third, fourth sort of favourites as such. A very well experienced side with John Eales, with George Gregan and yourself. And you scored the fastest try in the tournament, but you almost felt like you built on momentum once you got that first win, you sort of consistency. And I don't ever recall you being headed in the tournament.
No, I think, 6 matches in, obviously including all the finals, and we, didn't have a try scored against us, and there was 1 try in the tournament against us, which was the USA. So defensively, we were outstanding. It was a different sort of World Cup. It probably wasn't an open, expansive Rugby World Cup, apart from probably that semi-final with the All Blacks getting beaten by France. But we had a side that we didn't have many injuries. We were pretty lucky throughout the tournament, and as you mentioned, John Eales, George Gregan, Stephen Larkham, Joe Roth, Matt Burke. We had this amazing team, Todai Kefu, who had been together for 2 or 3 years, and this core part of the team. And we believed in each other, and we believed that we could win the tournament, but we were also had our feet on the ground and understood we respected different teams and had a great game plan, very good coaching staff in Rod McQueen, Tim Lane, Jeff Miller. These assistant coaches were very strong, and our skill level defensively was outstanding. We're probably one of the fittest sides in the competition, and that certainly showed what we could do towards the end of the tournament.
And Tim, an interesting fact, I don't know if this is true or not, but apparently you suffered food poisoning before the semi-final victory against South Africa. Can you explain that, and how can you play a Rugby World Cup semi-final while going through a food poisoning? Were the anxious sort of nights the day before? Was it touch and go whether you would play?
Well, we thought it was food poisoning, but on the Wednesday night, we're all allowed to go and stay out with friends or family. And I went to a friend's place in London, a really very good friend of mine, and my wife and I went there and had something to eat. Next morning I woke up, didn't feel that well, went back to the hotel on Thursday, and then I was quite sick all Thursday, all Friday. And I rang my mate on Friday. I hadn't had anything to eat. And I rang my mate and said, "Oh, not sure. Do you feel sick, mate? Are you been crook with a food poisoning?" He said, "No." He said, "Oh, actually, my daughter has a vomiting bug and she was here the other night. I said, well, that's it. So I caught it from his daughter, and I don't think I told her daughter that. But yeah, got on the bus on the Saturday to go to the test match. I had a jog around about 10 a.m. on the Saturday morning before that test match against England. Against South Africa in the semi-final. And it was an opportunity to play in a semi-final. I wasn't going to miss it, but I wasn't going to use, the excuse of being sick for 2 days. Physically, I felt good. Mentally, I was okay. And I think I played about 75 minutes of the match, and lucky enough, we won it in extra time.
And tell us about that 1999 Rugby World Cup final. We all know Bernard Foley's penalties. We all know the Titanic sort of tussle was. But did you feel maybe at halftime sitting in that dressing room, you were where you wanted to be? Did you feel that you were in a position there that everything was going to sort of plan in terms of what is it like being in a dressing room at halftime in a Rugby World Cup final?
Yeah, we're still pretty close from memory against France. And, you're playing against a side that could, and we knew what they'd done the week before. Everyone saw that semi-final against New Zealand and how they could explode. So we were pretty confident. We knew the next 10, 15 minutes after half-time was going to be very important. And defensively, we were very strong. But we also knew that we had to score some tries. So we went out there with an attacking mindset. I think some teams in World Cup finals can get very shy and clam up, but we wanted to play some attacking footy. We scored a couple of tries midway through that second half, and Matt Burke was brilliant with the boot. I think he kicked 8 or 9 penalties or conversions, and we ran away with it. But it took sort of the last 10 or 15 minutes to be comfortable, and even the last 10 minutes, you still thought the French could come back. And but with 5 minutes to go, you knew then you had a World Cup in your hands.
Yeah. And Tim, in terms of winning the Rugby World Cup, it's a unique for a player to do it once, but to do it twice and to do it such a 8-year sort of gap, 1991 to 1999. Was it a fitting moment, a bowing moment? Did you feel after being in rugby for more than 10 or 12 years that it was a right time, that if this was your last Rugby World Cup, which it turned out to be, that it was a poignant moment for you, given your journey, given the road that you had to come back to make this Rugby World Cup?
Yeah, I think, being part of the second World Cup was special, not just for me, but to watch the players and understand how much it meant to the players and the staff. And yeah, it was a good way to virtually not finish your career, but getting close to finishing your career. I played one more season in 2000, then went to Saracens, but to be able to walk away from a Wallaby jersey in sort of 18 months' time and know that you'd won a couple of World Cups and help put rugby on the map in Australia, that was pretty special.
And Tim, we're nearly running out of time, but the final sort of 1 or 2 questions for you. Throughout your career, you would have played Ireland many times and throughout your career. But for you, who was probably one of the most Irish players that you came up against that really stood out to you? Maybe that's under-recognised or underachieved that you had great admiration for?
Yeah, I didn't play a lot against Brian O'Driscoll. I played a little bit in the early part of his career, but had the privilege to play against Brian a couple of times, and what a player he was, especially in the early part of his career. And when you look at players like that, even when you look way back, Brendan Mullen, I think it was, in the early days. I remember playing against him when he came out for the British and Irish Lions in 1989. I think I was only 18, and I remember holding him by the jersey in one game. He turned around and hit me in the side of the head. So I thought, gee, well, welcome to footy. And but yeah, those sort of players, so many players through that Irish era that were lucky enough against Ireland. I don't think I ever lost against Ireland in my career, but to be able to play against someone like Brian and see then how much Brian went on in his career to be successful, and not just in professional rugby, but also in that sort of lower divisions, whether it was with Leinster or whether it's sort of anywhere else around the world, and the Lions. And yeah, great friend of mine and one of the best players in the world.
And Tim, second last question for you now. You would have played against iconic players that are no longer with us, Joos van der Westhuizen and Jonah Lomu. Your experience, probably Joos, one of the great all-time greats South African rugby as well, probably one of the great scrum halves, and Jonah Lomu, revered, an absolute machine when it comes to scoring try. Have you any great stories or great personal memories of your time battling against Joos or Jonah?
Well, I had the chance to play with actually Jonah Lomu and Hughes van der Westhausen in the Barbarians back, I think it was 2001. We played a few test matches, one against Scotland, and to have those guys in that side, Percy Montgomery was in it. We had a wonderful team, and to see that 68,000 people that in Edinburgh against Scotland to watch Jonah play, and 67,000 were there just to watch Jonah. There's 1,000 there to probably watch the rest of us, but to play at Murrayfield in a test match, Barbarians test match with those two players was pretty special.
Tim Horan, finally for me to you, if you look in the mirror now and you see the Tim Horan, the rugby player, and you summarise his career and you have to look back in it, and there's 2 sentences to describe it, what would those 2 sentences read in terms of Tim Horan, the rugby player?
Well, hopefully I've, in a funny way, inspired, young boys and girls throughout my career to play the game of rugby, or just to be healthy and play sport. And I suppose the other thing is the networks and the mates and the friendship I've got from playing the game all over the world, whether it's, playing against Brian O'Driscoll, whether it's playing in South Africa and being able to go back to South Africa and see friends and mates from all over the world that you've played rugby against. That's probably what I've got best out of the game. Not the medals, not the trophies. It's the people that you've met throughout the time playing.
On that note, Tim Horan, absolute pleasure joining us today to relive your iconic rugby career in this episode of Global Rugby Legends. Obviously, a 2-time Rugby World Cup winner, scored multiple tries for Australia, appearing 80 appearances, 140 points between 1989 and 2000. One of the most iconic rugby centres, scored the fastest Rugby World Cup try in 1999 and great voted one of the all-time Rugby World Cup greats. Tim, an absolute pleasure talking to us today. Take care. God bless.
Brilliant, Jim. Cheers, mate. Thanks, Jim. Talk soon, mate.
Thanks, Tim.